Hey everyone, welcome to this very special lesson. This is the first in a series on phrasing that I'm going to be doing. Now phrasing is very, very important and it's not talked often enough about in music education, I think. So let me tell you a little bit about the goal of what we're going to do in this series. So one thing is to understand what phrasing is and how we can do it and how it's often done, like different tools and techniques to manipulate phrasing and create phrases, and hear what other people do and how they phrase, but also exercises on how to internalize this. So what we want to do is we want to take these concepts that maybe are analytical or whatnot, or in a song, maybe you have a hard time with certain phrases in a certain song. How can we make exercises that can internalize something, whether it's just basic 4-bar phrases or maybe a 5-bar phrase or a phrase with a bar of 3 in the middle of it, or whatever happens. Like we can kind of like try to internalize that. So we're going to have some exercises to go through this. So before we get started with everything, let me say what we're going to do in today's lesson. First, I'm going to talk about phrasing, and you can skip to wherever you need. So we're going to talk about phrasing, what it is, how we can like manipulate it, different tools and tricks that we can do it. Then we're going to talk about marking time, which is a basic way of phrasing. And we'll go through different levels of that. And then I'm going to get into the kind of exercises proper. And these exercises for today are mostly going to be in how to feel comfortable with different lengths of bars in phrasing. And this is really helpful for both improvising, composing, and just even performing things, right? This is the idea of it. So there's going to be a lot of improvised licks by me. And when we get to that part, I'm going to give you some licks if you're not comfortable with improvising. I'll give you maybe a handful of licks up on the screen that you can use instead of trying to figure out your own thing. But I think it's nice to work on coming up with your own stuff and improvising, because that's just another layer of thinking that you have to do while you're keeping a phrase down. And I'm going to just mention, as a benefit to my Patreon users, if you hear me improvise something that you think is kind of cool or you'd like the tab of it, I will give, every Patreon user can ask me to transcribe one lick out, and I'll put it all in a shared PDF for everyone. But you have to do it, just give me the time code of where it is. You have to do it before the end of 2025. Then I will share all those licks with everybody who's on Patreon. Okay, so let's get into this. So what is phrasing? So often when we think about phrasing, we're thinking about like spoken word, how we phrase a sentence, that sort of thing. Or a sentence itself is a phrase. And that's a big part of music as well, like these melodic vocal phrases that are actually tied to what is being said. But we're going to actually start simpler. There's a lot of things we can do musically to create phrases, right? Now, all a phrase is some sort of tension and some sort of resolution, right? And I'm going to give you a little tip here. All music theory is that. There is not any music theory that I've ever come across for any genre on any instrument that isn't about basically either understanding how someone is creating tension and resolving, or a system of tools for creating and resolving tension, right? So let's talk about the most basic of them, or the basic ones that we have that are very, very common. And the most basic one I can think of is rhythm, right? So I'm going to give you a basic rhythm. Da, or well, let's say we have a pulse. Da, 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 da. There's no real tension in that. There can be. If we keep it going, it's going to get boring, and there's going to be tension through the boredom of that, which is a legitimate way of creating tension. But it's just kind of a pulse. There's nothing there that kind of creates tension inside of it, aside from the boredom. So if I change that second beat and go dee-dee, so I go da, dee-dee, da, dee-dee, da, dee-dee, right? Now all of a sudden, that speed up is creating a little bit more tension, which resolves when we go back down to the da, right? Da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee, da. And I think of actually these rhythms and a lot of musical phrases are circular, which means they kind of resolve back into themselves and just kind of keep going. It's like a perpetual motion machine, right? Da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee, da, right? Now, the most common way to create tension with rhythm is to speed up, I guess, but it doesn't need to be sped up. It's anything that's different. So if I do 3 pulses and then have a pause, ba, 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 right? That whole there kind of gives us, that's a like a 4-beat phrase, ba, 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 pause, ba, ba, ba. So it doesn't have to be by adding rhythms or making something faster that you're going to get phrases. It's just the changing of what's happening. That's what's creating the tension, it's the change. Okay, so we can do it with rhythm. We can also do it with melody. So melody is anything that you can sing, essentially, right? And basically the way melody works is when we hear a note, and there's a bunch of things in a song that kind of like direct our ears to what the most important note is. But when we hear just a note in a vacuum, this is our note. This is our home note. It sounds fine. We've got it. We've established this note. This is a G note. So if we move anywhere away from that note, we are creating tension, right? If I go to, this is a G, I'm going to go to an A. Okay, this is a little tense. It wants to go back down to da, right? So we create that tension there just by moving. And different notes that we can get on a banjo are going to create different amounts of tension. Some notes are like not so tense at all, right? And some notes are really tense, right? Now, we often, and when we think about phrases too, you often get into like islands of tension, right? So you have like you're resolved, and then you go up to a place that's kind of like it's a little island of release, but you're not at home. You're somewhere that's kind of nice, but then you go back down home. And then we're done. That's that phrase. So we kind of have these kind of systems of like you can resolve tension a little bit to a nice place. Like I often think about it in terms of location. You know, I leave my home and it's like, oh, crazy streets. This is not very nice. Oh, now I'm in a nice coffee shop. I'm here. I'm very comfortable. But at some point I'm going to have to go back home. Okay. So that's melodic tension. Now the next step that we often do is harmonic tension. Now, these are all heuristics that we use to kind of, again, create tension. They're systems. And harmony is just, we think of it as chords, right? So if I think I have a G chord, I want to create tension, you just go to another chord, right? I can go to a C chord, right? Adds tension and resolution. A D chord is more tense and wants to resolve more to the F, right? An F chord also has a little more tension than the C, right? The C we could sit on for a while, right? So different chords have different amounts of tension. But I'm going to give a couple tricks about this. Like, harmony is just, it's a conceptualization of tension, melodic tension, if that makes sense. So a chord is just a bunch of different harmonies all put together, right? So we often use it as a tool for musicians. Like when you see a chord structure in a song, like the chord progression goes G, G, C, G, G, D, G, whatnot. The way we actually understand that and play to it is that's a system of tension. Musicians look at it and they understand that knowledge well enough to go like, oh, okay, like we're here and then we have some sort of tension and then we kind of resolve and then we have more tension than we resolve. That's all harmonic structures are. And when you understand it that way, it becomes a lot easier to do more kind of advanced stuff. When you hear people put other chords in other spots or do crazy stuff, well, as long as they kind of respect the structure of the tension in the song, then you can get away with almost anything. So we kind of flip back and forth between harmonic thinking and melodic thinking, right? So for example, like, and it's a way of describing a sound. So like that sound of an F to a G, right? If I know what that sound is and I want to create that sound melodically, I could just think, okay, well, I'm just going to play the notes of an F going, here's a G note. If I want to create that F to G sound melodically, I could, do a line that's just that. It's a melody, but I'm thinking about the chords. That's maybe a bit higher. That'll be in some more of these other lessons a bit more. We're kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent. But so that is the idea. Those are our three kind of biggest tools in our toolkit to create phrases: rhythmic, melodic, and harmonic. And we do that all together. Now, one thing I'm going to point out to you here is, I'll get this in a second. We're going to talk about marking time. So what is marking time? Marking time is essentially the practice of creating phrases that are, we don't often talk about this with like vocal phrases. We talk about this with like musical phrases, like using rhythm, that sort of thing. I always used to think it was something the drummer did. When I was in high school in rock bands, I'd be like, oh yeah, the drummer just like puts a fill every 4 bars or at the end of every section. So if I'm ever lost, I just look at the drummer and he goes, digga-digga-digga-digga, and I know where I am. But we all mark time, and we should be marking time, and even in very fine, like small ways. Even like not so advanced musicians, like just beginners, if they're just playing by themselves, they will do little tiny things that mark time, especially when they're feeling comfortable. So let's get a little more analytical about marking time. So all we do to mark time is just create tension and resolve it. And when we look at musical phrases, we often nest tensions, right? So we can mark time in 1 bar, we can mark time in 2 bars, we can mark time in 4 bars, and often we're actually doing all of those things all at the same time. And you can use this for all sorts of interesting things. Like you think a lot of like minimalist and post-minimalist music, or like a lot of mathy music, what they'll do is they'll create like very simple tense phrases, but they'll make phrases that don't fit together. So example, a phrase that's 3 beats and a phrase that's 5 beats. And because they don't match up, they create even a longer phrase. So you can do all sorts of interesting things here, but let's jump into this. Let's take a look at just a basic pattern. Let's take a look at the pinch pattern, right? So I want to point out a couple things. This is 1 bar long, but we're already, by doing that, we're marking time. We're marking time in 1 bar. And you can hear it in a couple ways. One is we have a rhythmic phrase that's only 2 beats long. Or sorry, I was thinking of this. Let's do this. This is a little bit clearer. The same thing works with the pinches, but here I have a rhythmic phrase. Da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee, da, dee, dee. And then I also have a melodic phrase. Ba, bo, ba, bo. Right? We're going from less tension, more tension, less tension, more tension. Right? So that's a 1 bar phrase. All of the rolls basically do that, just inherent in the way we play them. So if we want to mark 2 bars, which is a common thing to do, is we just do something at the end of the 2nd bar. It could literally be just put a hole in there, right? Da, da, do, da, do, da, do, da, do. Anything you do is going to create a phrase, and as long as you're consistent with that sort of phrasing, people catch on to that, right? This is what, when you go and listen to like a beginner musician who doesn't do a very good job, often they kind of violate these things. They start like, they put a 3 bar phrase and then they put a 2 bar phrase, and you're like, that doesn't match up with anything you're doing. Okay, so let's talk about the first real exercise, and that's going to be marking time with 4 bars, because we just want to get really comfortable with this. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to play a 4 bar phrase, do whatever you want on a G chord for the first 3 bars, and then we're going to do something different on the 4th bar. Now, if you're not comfortable with improvising, we can just do the basic, the lick. I'll put the... So this is the exercise. You just play 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, then a different thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. Now, let's talk a little bit about counting really quick. A lot of people aren't comfortable counting, and to be honest, when you play music, you don't want to be counting. That said, it is one of the best tools we have for internalizing stuff very quickly. So if you play this exercise and you can't automatically feel really comfortable with, oh, that's the 4th bar, I know it, then I want you to count. Just go through and count it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 3rd bar. Now here's the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. Right? And you just kind of get away with doing that. That's how you go. And then once you feel you don't need to count because you are really, 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 really confident that you have 4 bar phrases, then you can kind of abandon it. But the counting can help you, especially if you find there's like a phrase that screws you up. I used to play in a lot of bands where we get like 1 rehearsal to do all original music. And the rule I had was like, you know, if I messed up the first time playing it, like I went, okay, that section you got to count. Just, you know, if it goes 3 bar and a 7 bar, like just count those parts so you can nail it. Okay. So that's marking time in 4 bars. It's good exercise. Now let's get back to what I was saying before about vocal and melodic phrases, because most of the time we're playing songs. And if we're playing songs, most of the structure actually comes from the vocal phrases, right? Now, 99% of the time, if you're playing folk music, you're going to have 4 bar phrases. And there's not that many ways you can actually resolve a 4 bar phrase. So we're going to take a look at the most common ones. Probably the most common, well, there's 2 I would say are very common. You have a phrase that ends on bar 3. So I'll give you an example here. This one. Ba-do-da-do-da. 4, 2, 3, 4. Ba-do-da-do. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3, 4. Very, very common. Now, playing it without doing any pinches or playing anything else, that's also a really important exercise. I have a lot of banjo students who sound really great, but as soon as you ask them not to play rolls the whole time, their sense of time goes out because it's tied to their fingers. You've got to have that sense of time up here. So that's a good exercise to just play by itself. Now let's take a look at a phrase that has ends on bar 4. So something like this. 2, 3, 4. phrasings on bar 4, right? Those are, you can come up with your own phrases that do this, but it's nice to get really comfortable with this. So here's where we get into the exercise. So let's take that first phrase. We have 2 bars and then 2 bars of basically empty space. So we can start adding something in there to kind of just, it's called a response. So we have this melody, we're going to take it as a call, and we're going to have a little response to it, right? And you can kind of improvise along with that. And I recommend the first time you do it, the first couple times, try to do it without playing any rolls or conventional licks. See if you can do that. Make sure that you're internalizing the music, right? If you need to, you can count along. Now, if you're not at that level where you feel really comfortable improvising in that way, you can start with licks. So let me just give you, so I'll put this as a lick section. I'm going to give you some basic licks. So you have the lick, right? I'll give you, this is a really common one. What's another one that we could do? We could have one where we kind of like don't hit the G. Right? And then this one. So those are really common licks. You can figure out your own licks to do in this, but try playing this melody and then try doing it with those licks. So you could just sit here and go, okay, like when you do that melody, you could do it with pinches, then licks. You can also do any of the rolls you want. Like however you phrase that melody is totally up to you, but you still want to make sure it resolves on beat 3. So you could do thumb alternating, then a forward reverse. I'll do that again. So I'm just going to noodle a little bit around with this exercise. I'll improvise a bit, and just a reminder, if you're a Patreon member, you like any of these licks that I do, you can ask me to transcribe 1 lick out per person, as long as you do it before the end of 2025, and then I'll put them all up in a shared PDF so all the Patreon members can take a look at them. But let me just see what happens. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Big pause. Good enough. Little basic ones. Okay. Continuing on, let's take a look at that next phrase, which is the 4 bars where we resolve on bar 4, right? So here's the melody again. Da, do, 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 da, dee, da, do, da, 2, 3, 4, da, do, do, da, dee, da, do, da. So you can figure out how you want to play this, whatever rolls you want to do, experimenting around, you can rephrase it in different ways. But the important thing is you're landing on beat 4 or on bar 4, right? Now we can just put a lick in there. It's very simple, like just a basic lick. You only have 1 bar to do something, so. You don't have as much space, and it gets less musical to like put in something crazy there. It really depends on the context of the song, but that's not the point here. The point here is that we're like feeling really comfortable with that. Oh, here it resolves, we keep going, and then it starts again. You kind of really internalize that. So let's take a look at what you might do with something that's very like a little more complicated. For example, a 4-bar or 5-bar phrase. So when I was doing the guitar video 10 minutes ago, I came up with this like 5-bar phrase here. So let me do it again. Let's see if I can remember. Remember. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Right? So there was actually something weird about this one. So again, you can play that however you want. Now, what's tough here is that phrase is quite long and then it resolves, and we only have one bar to kind of do something, so it becomes musically not like tougher to do it there, and also like maybe a little less appropriate. But a bigger problem is the phrase starts on a D. So when we do a phrase, like a response phrase, we kind of have two options. Either we're going to, I mean, you could ignore this and just do whatever you want. That's also something. But generally speaking, we either want to resolve our phrase, which is very tough in a bar. So it's like, and then you start again, right? That's like resolving a phrase in 2 beats. This is very short. Or what you can do is you kind of target the note that you want to. And often we're orbiting, in the last few phrases, we're orbiting around the G note. So as long as we like hit above or below a G note, like they kind of are interchangeable like Lego blocks. But this time we're going down to a D. So that means we have to do something that we don't have to do something. Generally speaking, musically, what we want to do is do something that would land nice on a D. We want to have a musical phrase that lands on a D. Now this is going to be explored a lot more in another video of phrasing, but for now, let's just talk a little bit about this. So like when we do the lick, what's nice about the lick, one of the reasons why it works really well, is it can go up to G. It can also go down to D quite well. And people manipulate it different ways. Like often you think about 5-Mountain Breakdown, we manipulate it so we're going up to an E. So you can actually change these phrases to go what ways you want with these licks. But I'm just going to say what note choices we pick. So if I want to get down to this D, I want to do something that goes to the D. So if I'm kind of like, that's really kind of obnoxious. So I would even like, instead of going, maybe I go, or that's at least bridging it. I'm going to a lower note. But another thing I can think of is I just think melodically, how do I go to that note? Well, I resolve on this G. I've got basically 3 beats to do something. So I can just kind of go down to the D. It's the lowest note. I can't approach it from below, but I can. And variations on that, like with different rolls. That wasn't very clean, but it made sense. Right? Any sort of little variation on those. Okay, well I hope this helps. I hope people kind of found it useful. And again, these phrases are not like these exercises. I've given you very specific ones that you can do, but do ones from songs that are giving you problems, or do ones if you like want to come up with 5-bar phrases. Or to be honest, like let's say I have a hard time with a 5-bar phrase in a song. It's nice to practice that song, but it's also really nice to just practice 5-bar phrases. Can I make something up that resolves in a similar way, right? And also that doing other ideas of a similar thing can really help you internalize this phrase. So it's not just like, oh yeah, this is that weird phrase in that song, I'm just going to play this. It's more like, oh yeah, I know it's a 5-bar phrase, I got it. You know, like I you don't even need to think that it's a 5-bar phrase. I'm just following the phrase. So try to come up with your own versions of these exercises. Do your own improvising at the end. It can be the simplest thing in the world. You know, instead of playing a lick, you can just literally put a pause or just one note. You know, like whatever it is. That was kind of a wrong note. Yeah, experiment around with these things. Hopefully I'll see you in the other videos. If you like the stuff that I'm doing, please consider supporting me on Patreon because it really, really helps. But good luck with everything. If you have questions, let me know. Tell me how you like this. I'd really like to hear the feedback. Okay, bye.